Welcome to my podcast, Soma Says. I so appreciate you being here, Dr. Naqvi. Today, we'll be talking about a very hot topic that a lot of women want to learn about and have been hearing on the media. And there's been a lot out there. And so I value someone with your expertise to help educate us between perimenopause and menopause. A lot of people are still confused as to what these two terms mean. And can you explain the difference between the two?
Absolutely. So first, I want to say thank you for inviting me over. This is one of my favorite topics. And the reason is it's really personal because I'm going through it myself. And one of the ways that we want to educate everyone about this important transition in our lives is just doing what you're doing, really talking from a public platform, making sure that we're all educated on, and it's not just in silos, meaning in the doctor's office. We should be able to talk about it openly, encourage each other to have conversations about it, right? It's not a secret, this menopause. And we're not pausing my life for anything. We are actually starting, as I like to look at it, a second version. My 2.0 version will be coming out soon, okay? And when it does, the world has to watch out for it. To answer your question about, honestly, when I enter a room and a person's asking me about what's going on with me, I start with some of the basics and I actually get to the end and then I walk myself backwards. And what I mean by that is I start off with the definition of what does menopause mean? And menopause means essentially that you have no bleeding whatsoever for a whole calendar year. I make sure about that. So your period, no pun intended, the years prior to that milestone is actually your menopause transition. And that can vary by years in every person. So no two women will go through this menopause transition the same way. What we will all do is stop bleeding, and we will hit that milestone. But prior to that, it could be 2 years, it could be 5 years. Roughly speaking, average age for a woman in the United States to undergo menopause is about 50, 51. I say usually menopause transition may start occurring around 45. And by the time your cycles start getting irregular, meaning you're skipping your periods are essentially getting shorter, longer, heavy, light, or anything goes during this time with your period. You're about 1 to 2 years shy of hitting that milestone. So it helps to walk the women through this journey because it can be so varied from one person to another person. Perimenopause is essentially the time period where it includes this menopause transition that we're talking about and 1 year after you stop bleeding. So it's a little bit the same, but a little bit different. But to me, I use the words interchangeably, menopause transition and perimenopause, because at the end of the day, I have to address what the person sitting across from me is talking about and what their issues are. So it just helps to level set however she identifies herself. But for the purposes of our conversation, I'll be referring to she and women, she and her. So it helps to identify where she is and just to keep going with the conversation. Yeah.
Hey everyone. Big shout out to Ariel Vivleka, founder of Finally All Natural. Ariel is on a mission to educate people about hidden ingredients in skincare products. Did you know the FDA allows incidental ingredients that aren't labeled or disclosed? That's why Finally All Natural is special. They focus on how ingredients are created, excluding extracts and essential oils, and have world-first formulas that work for a variety of skin types. They've also partnered with CleanHub for eco-friendly packaging and offer an exclusive organic face oil that has been scientifically proven to boost the proteins in your skin, enhancing hydration and strengthening the skin barrier. All 100% vegan. If you're into holistic skincare or non-toxic living, Ariel is your go-to expert. Keep up the amazing work, Ariel. Get in touch with her today. All the links are in description below.
Most common symptoms that women can experience during perimenopause and then obviously eventually menopause.
Like I said, no two women go through it alike. However, the most universal thing that will happen to us is we'll stop bleeding. Other than that, anything goes. But most of the symptoms that I see women that come in my office for are what we call vasomotor symptoms, hot flushes, night sweats. They may have sleep disturbances. They may have mood changes. They may have what's happening with me, joint pains, vague aches and pains that you can't explain. Brain fog, that's another good one. Palpitations, the inability to cope with multiple things at the same time. It's hard to put it into words. All of those can be very varied. Not every woman will experience that, but most will do the vasomotor symptoms, like I said, hot flushes, night sweats, sleep disturbances. Another one that I seem to find more, and this is after they've gone through the transition, is vaginal dryness. So what we call the genitourinary syndrome of menopause, but just putting it in terms like it's just dryness, it's itchiness, it's painful sex. Those are the terms some of my patients have used, and that's a whole separate category. Can that occur during a menopause transition? Absolutely. But I find it more occurring a little bit after the change has already happened.
You also mentioned your own experience with the perimenopause.
Yeah.
Can you feel comfortable sharing what your experience has been and how that's inspired you to help others?
Coming from a South Asian background, it's not a topic that's openly discussed. So growing up in this country, you really, where I work, where I live, what I eat, all has had an impact on me. The genetics I can't change, but the rest of it, I'm sure, had a tremendous impact on me. So I can't compare myself to somebody who is currently going through it in a South Asian country, but definitely I brought some influence, definitely has had on me. But I didn't have a lot of education about it. My mother went through it. All I remember is her telling me as a teenager, why didn't you do your laundry? But harping about it. But then I'm like, I was a teenager. So was she going through menopause or was it just me not listening? But you start that journey, and then I became a doctor. Go through that, not much information, right? Went through an OBGYN residency. Now, here I was lucky, I will say. I came up through my educational career at the time of basically early 2000s. I went into private practice. I felt comfortable actually managing hormone replacement therapy, or what we call now menopause hormonal treatment, because I'd seen it. I had seen my mentors, I had seen my colleagues, older colleagues go through it, managing it. So I was well versed, but was I confident? Maybe not. It was my early years in my career. But then as early 2000, the big kaboom happened in our lives. So we'll talk about that, I'm sure, delve into that a little bit. But coming up then, you basically weren't exposed to it. So now here I am. I'm like, wait, am I the senior person now? Because I have all these graduates that have come out and they really don't know. And I think there was a study published, I think in 2016, don't quote me on this, we'll look it up, but only about 7% of the OBGYN graduates really have exposure or have been taught about this. And that's really sad because guess what? Half the population of the world is women. By 2030, 1 billion women will be or have entered menopause. That's 6 years from now. So the reason I openly talk about my journey as I'm going through it is because I want to make sure, and I am very open with my patients too, because I want them to understand that I don't have a secret pill. I'm not taking something I'm going through it right with them. So absolutely, battling with hot flushes, night sweats, insomnia, you name it. I already mentioned the vague joint pains and all this other stuff. It happens. So it's reality for me as well. Yeah, I love to openly share about it, but I'm using it to make sure that we empower women to manage their menopause. That's honestly what drives me to this. And you asked earlier, you can see the passion. And the reason is because this is what it's all about, empowering the next generation, empowering the women that we are, just like you're doing right now. You're educating, right? We're trying to provide the source of information. But in the office, we're doing a shared decision model, right? So we're asking the patient to come on this journey. Are they okay with this plan or not? Where are we going with this? But then to take that message and go maybe to work. Most of us are working during this transition. What does that translate into? So really talking about it even in our boardrooms or wherever we're working, because it's part of our lives. We don't have the luxury to turn it on or turn it off.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I think a lot of my professional women, and even if you are a stay-at-home mom, obviously this can affect them too. But when you're at work and you need to be able to do a presentation and you're just flushed in the face and you're just sweating and your armpits are wet, how are you going to be able to do that? So it can be so challenging.
I want to take a moment to give a huge shout out to Melissa Murphy-Pavone and her amazing team at Mindful Financial Partners. Melissa has over 18 years of experience as a certified financial planner and divorce financial analyst. And what truly sets her apart is how she values people over portfolios. Whether you're going through major life changes or just want to take control of your financial future, Melissa's approach is all about aligning your wealth with the life you truly want to live. She doesn't just focus on growing wealth, but also on creating balance and purpose in your financial journey. You can get in touch with her at her website, mindfulfinancialpartners.com, and you can find all the links in the description. Be sure to check it out.
I can share with you, believe it or not, I've been perimenopausal for 15 years. Can you believe that? Can you believe that? And when it first started happening, highlighting the lack of education that we as doctors, I don't even remember learning about menopause, or maybe it was just glanced over. I always think about this. There's so much that goes into educating us about puberty and pregnancy. And obviously those are very important stages of our lives. But then it just falls off a cliff after that. Okay, you're menopausal. Who cares? But does that mean our life is over? Right. No.
Absolutely not.
So when these changes first started happening to me, it was so vague and I couldn't figure out what was going on with my own body, why I was gaining weight when I wasn't eating any different and not even unhealthily, and why working out like a fiend like I did before wasn't taking the weight off like it was before. And it slowly took me some time and I was like, oh, and even within that, the hormonal changes that I was going through don't mirror everyone else's. So, for example, like my estrogen at that time was like off the charts, and someone can take a look at it. Oh, you're not in your menopause. I wasn't. It's been 15 years, but I had a super high estrogen for a reason, and that was contributing to the weight gain.
It's important. Now, if you look back, we didn't even have research. Even as doctors, we had the tools to go and research this, but the data wasn't there. So I think we've really come a long way, thanks to many scientists and many people who are devoted to this. And I will give a shout out to the femtech industry that's come up, that's making this very mainstream. It's still not enough. I think it's just a sliver, but we still need to talk about it. But I think the research wasn't even there. And it didn't help, like for me, it didn't help that it coincided with COVID. So here I thought I had COVID, like I had 2020 COVID, the original vid. I thought, oh, I have cardiomyopathy. I have brain something. COVID is eating my brain. I'm a doctor. I'm a highly educated person. I'm going through this and I'm like, there is something wrong with me. And then I'm like, wait, then slowly the pieces are coming together. And I'm like, oh my God, this is what it means. And now everything. Yeah, you're right about the weight gain. Seriously. Can we just talk about that for a second?
Yes,
It
of
just
course.
does not melt. It just does not go. The thing is, people ask, it's like, what can I do? And I'm like, my God, I wish I had the thing that I would use it. So it comes down to really, okay, I've never exercised. Okay, this is being honest. I've never exercised in my life. Never. As an OB, 10,000 steps is nothing, right? Like you're delivering babies, you're going up and down, you're doing surgery. So as my career, I started slowing down. I became more ambulatory versus inpatient medicine, right? All of a sudden, this is like creeping up on me. And I'm like, oh, okay, I just have to do some modification to what I eat and I'll be good. No, sisters, that's not how this works. It's a whole different world. It's just at this point, you're just like, oh, what gives me a little bit of breathe? Like I look forward. I'm like, yes, this is temporary because it's a different type of estrogen that's at play that's causing this to happen because we need this belly fat to store a certain type of estrogen to be able to function normally. So it gives me a little peace of mind, but it doesn't make it any easier that I have to look at myself. It's a little funny story. That's a reality of us. We're going through it. Yes, exercise does help.
So we're throwing out these words, estrogen and belly fat and storage. So tell us about the hormonal changes that occur during perimenopause and menopause.
So good question. So before the menopause transition, our menstrual cycle is very predictable for most of us. We start with our first day of menstrual cycle. We start bleeding. We have a certain set of hormone levels. They're pretty nice and steady. Then they start going up, and that triggers what we call ovulation, the release of an egg. Then as soon as that happens, those set of hormone levels abate and slow down. But another set of different hormones called progesterones, they will start to rise. And the purpose of them is not to trigger ovulation, because that's already happened. It's actually to prime the uterus for a pregnancy that's about to occur. So if there is no pregnancy, you shed that lining, and that's called your period again. So this happens on a monthly basis. Here we are going through it. Post-menopause, we know our ovaries make less and less of this typical type of estrogen, progesterone, to some degree testosterone too. It's not that my ovary is dead. It's just making less of it. And you're not getting the release of the eggs because we're just born with a finite amount of eggs or follicles that we call them. So that's pretty steady state too. We know what's happening before menopause transition. During this time, this is why hormonal testing is we don't recommend it. I don't do it. The reason is our hormone levels fluctuate so much. It can be daily, it can be hourly, it could be weekly. If you look at the graph, it is up and down all over the place. It really doesn't guide us to say, oh, women ask me, they're like, can you do hormone testing? I'm like, you know what? That's not how you make the diagnosis of menopause or perimenopause. It's really based on what you're sharing with me, what you're talking about. So because the hormone levels vary so much, it's really not a good idea to test it. It's not that it's not a good idea. It's just you're not getting what you want out of it. So what's the point of doing it? There are certain conditions where you do want to check your hormone levels. For instance, if you're 40, 35, your periods go missing, or you're feeling like you're in menopause, like I would want to know. Or you're somebody who has been diagnosed or didn't know you had PCOS. Or you have, let's say, an IUD, a hormonal-based IUD, and you're using that to transition yourself into menopause, but you don't have any of the other things that we just talked about. Hey, did you go through it or did you not before I pulled that IUD out? So there's certain clinical situations where you do want to get testing for, but most of the time you really don't need it. You can use it to support what you might be going through, but you don't need it to diagnose it. So just like you shared with you, my estrogen level was super high. That just shows I'm not in menopause, but clearly you're feeling something. There's something going on. If you repeat it 2 days later, it might have been down all the way down at the bottom. So it really didn't help. So that's what hormonal testing, to me, this is how I guide my patients through it. And most of them, once I explain it, they get it.
Are you a woman with big financial dreams but no idea how to reach them? You'll love working with Dr. Annie Cole, a money coach who's on a mission to help women earn more, build wealth, and retire early. In her 20s, Annie was a burnt-out social worker, struggling on a $26,000 salary. By her 30s, she had climbed the ladder to a vice president role, invested over $350,000, owned $1 million in real estate, and cut 20 years off of her retirement date. She now runs her own coaching business, Money Essentials for Women, and inspires women to step into new levels of money mastery and confidence. Ready to see how Annie can help you? Set up a free financial consultation at www.money-essential.com/coaching. While you're exploring her services, grab a copy of her new book, 101 Ways to Build Wealth, at money-essentials.com/book.
I find that a lot of patients struggle to understand that, though, because I think once I tell them that, okay, your hormones don't just stay level, hormones fluctuate, and sometimes we can catch something, but this won't guide us in our decision making. A lot of them also want their hormones tested even after they start HRT. And I let them know, unless there's a clinical reason to do, and I can't think of anything right now to do that. But I do see a lot of doctors who still do the testing. Not sure why, but I'm glad that you and I align in that way.
I think it has to do a little bit. The purpose of us talking is not just to educate the masses. It's also to have this open conversation that if you have other clinicians on the call that are listening to your podcast, you're actually educating. So for instance, I'm an avid reader. So as I'm going through it, like I said, my own personal journey, I recently picked up a couple of books because I like to use this as well to educate my patients. So they're always asking me, where can I learn more? So we have our national societies, we have Menopause Society. Sometimes a lot of these websites are clunky, right? They're very professionally driven. So it's hard to get the patient where they need to go. So I love Dr. Mosconi's latest book called The Menopause Brain. I would highly recommend it to your listeners. It's a very well-written book and really gets to the heart of what menopause is. And another author is Dr. Jennifer Gunther, The Menopause Manifesto, which you can probably see on my bookshelf. Those two books are really great. I say download it. You're on your commute, listen to it. This whole journey will make a lot of sense to you about what we're dealing with, instead of sending them to some random website. Because our job as clinicians to present information in simple terms, but it be unbiased, right? So I think that's the key, that we're not trying to sell a product. We're not trying to do anything like that. It's mostly just about educating.
Anything that we haven't touched that you would like to include in the podcast?
I will say, just because this is more a plea maybe to our young scientists, right? So whoever our young members in our medical community are, I will say that I think we need to do more research on women of color. I just think women in general don't have enough. We don't have enough research on ourselves. But when it comes to this space, I think there's just not enough. We have bits and pieces, but if you look at all the major studies, they really are not well representative of us. So I do think what you and I are going through, the only reason we can talk about it is because of the generation that we are. I think the generation, my mother's generation, I don't even know if they talked about it. They probably just said, okay, it's no big deal, right? And it's just, we need to talk more about it, document it, collect data on ourselves, and really see, are we different or not? Or what is our experience, right? Chemistry may be the same, but our experience is different. How we approach menopause is different. So again, women in different parts of the world have a different view of menopause than we do in this country. And I think putting a positive, optimistic point of view on it goes a long way than looking at this as a negative. I'm going to spend more than 40 years in it. I'm not going to be sad by it. Like I said, my 2.0 version is coming out and I'll invite you to the party. So
I accept your invitation.
thank you. As all my patients do. I tell them I'm going to have this huge block party when it's over. Everybody's invited. So they all laugh and they're like, yes, I'll wait for the invite. I'm like, it's coming. It's going to be here soon. Thank you so much for having me on this.
Oh, thank you. This was a lovely discussion and I can't wait for it to come out. Let us know, where can we find you? Do you have any social media links? Do you have a website? How can we find you?
So, believe it or not, I really am a humble OBGYN. I actually do have a practice. It's in Clark, New Jersey, part of Atlantic Health System for the Atlantic Medical Group. And I am there about 2.5 days a week. The rest of the time, I'm doing this fun stuff with you and doing my other administrative jobs. But they can always find me on LinkedIn as well.